I heard him before I even saw his face. The dock was busy with crew members loading supplies, but his voice cut through everything with a sharp confidence that came from generations of entitlement. The yacht floated in a perfect line with the pier, polished and blinding in the morning light. I was stepping off the deck when he pointed at me as if giving instructions to a stranger passing by. "Cleaning ladies only," he said, and several heads turned, unsure how to react. His tone carried the kind of certainty that never expects correction. It was not loud. It was the kind of voice that assumes ownership without ever having earned it. The crew froze for a moment, waiting to see if I would defend myself. Instead, I placed my foot on the dock with a calmness that surprised them. I did not explain who I was. I did not challenge him. I simply moved aside as if his words had been directed at someone else. He stepped onto the boat with a grin of satisfaction, believing he had restored order. He untied the rope with a flourish, eager to impress whoever might be watching. "Bye," he said, as if sending off someone beneath notice. A couple of the younger staff exchanged a glance, confused by my silence. I reached into my pocket and pressed a small key. The shift was immediate. The yacht's engines died in a single breath, leaving a thick silence hanging over the water. He turned in confusion, looking for someone to blame. "You did not raise your voice. You changed the situation." He spoke to me the way men like him speak to anyone they believe is beneath their world. His confidence did not come from achievement. It came from inheritance. He grew up surrounded by people who bowed to his last name, not his character. From childhood, he watched doors open without effort, so he never learned the weight of respect or the discipline that creates it. To him, wealth meant automatic authority, and every interaction confirmed that belief. Money had always cushioned his mistakes. When he raised his voice, others lowered theirs. When he dismissed someone, no one corrected him. He never questioned his position because he never had to build it. That environment shapes a certain kind of adult, one who believes visibility is the same as influence and who imagines that status is validated by volume. He expected people to respond to his tone rather than to substance. Standing on that dock, I saw exactly how his world had trained him. He expected loud confidence because he had never learned to recognize quiet control. He had been taught that the person who speaks the most holds the most power. Experience teaches a different truth. People with decades of work behind them know that silence is not weakness. It is evaluation. It is patience. It is preparation. Many underestimate those who do not display their authority, unaware that real authority is rarely displayed at all. He looked at me and saw someone with no claim. He never imagined that the person who steps aside might be the one who owns the ground. He thought ownership looked like noise. He had never met someone who owned systems. He walked onto that yacht as if it were the natural extension of his privilege. What he did not know was how carefully every part of it had been designed and how quietly the real authority behind it operated. The vessel was built with a layered control structure, one that protected the owner from reckless hands. The engines, the navigation system, and the helm were all connected through a central console that responded only to registered credentials. It was elegant technology, simple in use, but firm in power. The kind of design created to prevent exactly the sort of arrogance he had just displayed. Buried inside the system was a remote access tool that allowed the true owner to intervene from anywhere on the dock. A small key fob, no larger than a car remote, held commands that could disable the engines, freeze the navigation controls, and secure the helm. It was not dramatic. It was quiet engineering meant for responsible hands. The man who had just dismissed me had no idea such a feature existed because he had never been involved in the decisions that brought the yacht to life. Legally, the ownership chain was even stronger. Registration papers, maritime approvals, and insurance filings all carried one signature. Mine. Every authority that mattered knew exactly who the yacht belonged to, even if the heir who strutted across the deck believed otherwise. His assumptions were built on assumptions of his own status, not on the actual structure of possession. He believed the yacht would respond to his name alone. He never imagined that every system on board waited for the person who had earned the right to command it. He thought the yacht belonged to his name. It belonged to my signature. The sound of the engines dying spread across the water like a curtain falling at the end of a performance. One second, the yacht hummed with confidence, and the next it surrendered to a heavy silence that stunned everyone on the dock. He turned sharply toward the stern, expecting to see a mechanic or a misplaced crew member who could be blamed for the interruption. Instead, he saw motionless faces staring back at him, unsure of what they had just witnessed. His laughter, which had filled the air only moments earlier, thinned into confusion. The crew froze in place, hands suspended above ropes and crates as they waited for instructions that he suddenly could not give. For the first time, he looked smaller than the boat he tried to command. His expression shifted from amusement to irritation, then to something he had rarely felt in his protected world: uncertainty. He pressed random buttons, tapped the helm, and called out for explanations, but nothing answered him. Technology responds only to authority, and authority is not volume. I stepped closer to the edge of the dock, not to confront him, but simply to stand where he could see me clearly. The water between us was still, reflecting a moment he could not control. I did not raise my voice. I did not move with urgency. When he finally looked at me, truly looked, I gave him the only information that mattered. I am the owner. The words did not challenge him. They simply corrected the reality he had built in his mind. That was the first time he listened. The moment the helm locked, the consequences began to stretch far beyond the water. That yacht was not just a symbol of luxury. It was a centerpiece in a business arrangement he had been boasting about for months. Several investors were scheduled to join him for a coastal review tour that afternoon. The trip was meant to showcase his supposed leadership in a new maritime partnership. When the engines failed and he stood powerless in front of his own crew, the disruption was not simply inconvenient. It signaled something he never expected: a question about competence. Contracts had been drafted that required flawless operational safety. The yacht was listed as a demonstration asset tied to a proposal awaiting final signatures. Any malfunction, even one lasting a few minutes, triggered an obligation to report the incident to both insurers and compliance officers. When the system shut down, every safeguard in those documents activated silently. Reports were sent automatically, asking for explanations he could not provide. Insurance representatives reviewed the incident first, and their findings moved directly to the compliance department. The halt raised concerns about unauthorized handling of registered equipment. He was asked to justify his presence at the helm and to clarify who held operational authority. Each question pulled another thread from the image he had tried to project. Investors who had planned to board the yacht began calling immediately. They had witnessed the sudden shutdown from the opposite pier and demanded clarity. With every minute of silence, confidence in his leadership thinned. He had walked onto that yacht believing it elevated him. Instead, it revealed him. The yacht did not ruin him. Exposure did. When I left the dock, my phone began vibrating before I even reached the parking lot. The first calls came from him, each one more urgent than the last. I watched the screen light up, then fade, without lifting a finger. Messages followed, short at first, then increasingly frantic as he realized that the situation he created was no longer contained. I placed the phone face down on the seat and let it ring. Silence is a decision, and in that moment it carried more weight than any argument I could have offered. By midday, unfamiliar numbers started appearing. His lawyer tried twice, leaving careful voicemails filled with concern and crafted politeness. His assistant followed, repeating that there had been a misunderstanding and asking for a moment to clarify. None of it moved me. People who live on noise expect immediate reactions because they fear what calm can reveal. I had nothing to explain, and they had nothing to negotiate. Throughout the afternoon, more messages arrived. Some attempted charm, others pressed for a quick discussion, all assuming that pressure would force me into a reply. Age teaches a different rhythm. Experience teaches that time can do more work than confrontation. I allowed every alert to pass without interruption. I let the unanswered calls create their own landscape of consequences. Late in the evening, a final message arrived from an investor requesting information about the incident. I read it once, quietly, then set the phone aside again. Systems were already moving. Processes were underway. Nothing required my involvement. Urgency is for people without position. While I stayed silent, the board moved quickly. The incident report triggered an automatic review, and by the next morning, the directors had convened an emergency meeting. They began with the basics. Ownership documents were pulled from the registry, each one bearing my signature and confirming a reality he had never taken the time to understand. The more they read, the more questions they asked about his presence on the yacht that day. Access logs were examined next. The helm system recorded every attempt he made to restart the controls. Each entry showed an unregistered user trying to override locked functions. The board saw it clearly. A man with no authority attempting to command equipment he did not own. The logs revealed something else as well. His pattern of assuming privileges he had never been granted. It matched whispers they had ignored for years. One director requested his behavioral file from Human Resources. What they found confirmed what many had suspected. Prior complaints from staff, moments of arrogance dismissed as youthful confidence, and several warnings about disrespect toward operational teams. Nothing serious enough to act on before, but together they formed a picture that no longer fit the role he held. Investors were invited to share their impressions of the halted demonstration. Their statements were firm. They questioned his judgment, his reliability, and the culture he encouraged. Each observation made the board more aware of the risks they had overlooked. I was not present for any of this. I did not speak on my own behalf. I did not defend or accuse. The truth moved through the room without my assistance. I wasn't there when they removed him. I didn't need to be. If you have lived long enough to be underestimated, then you already understand the quiet strength that grows with time. Experience is not something you display. It is something you carry, and it becomes leverage the moment someone mistakes your silence for absence. Many assume that authority must be loud. They forget that the most decisive movements are often made without announcement or explanation. Ownership has never needed volume. It reveals itself through preparation, through signatures, through systems designed long before the moment they are needed. When you have built something with intention, you do not argue with those who assume control. You let structures speak the language they do not recognize. It is a language made of records, agreements, and responsibilities, not ego. Respect is not demanded. It is reinforced by consistency. With years behind you, you learn that the most effective response to arrogance is not confrontation. It is clarity. It is the steady refusal to perform for those who believe status can be taken rather than earned. Age teaches you to step aside just enough for truth to walk forward on its own. When someone underestimates you, resist the urge to correct them. Let them reveal their own limitations. Let them expose the gap between noise and knowledge. There is a dignity in watching a situation resolve itself without your intervention, especially when others begin to see what you always knew. You do not need to match their tone. You do not need to explain your position. You only need to allow the systems you built to unfold. People who confuse access with ownership always end up swimming back.